Are you ready?
Go for it. I'm ready. I'm walking.
Okay, so the Venezuelan incursion, invasion, military action, I don't know what you call it. It's not without historical precedent. This could be like a 5-minute conversation if we don't get spicy. But it's not without historical precedent, yes or no?
Yes, I guess.
Okay. The reason why
hold on, just as a hesitance thing here. So when people talk foreign policy and people talk historical foreign policy, I draw a big distinction between pre-91 and post-91. That pre-91, the U.S. was involved in a bunch of weird South American stuff. I get it. Whether you want to argue it was right or wrong, we were in the Cold War, domino theory, the Soviet Union was doing a bunch of crazy shit. We were doing a bunch of crazy shit. But I feel like the post-91 world order standards are different and should be different. I'm glad they're different. So when we say it's not without historical precedent, like I would say, true, we've done a lot of weird South American stuff, but post 91, not really. So that's why I hesitantly will agree.
Why do you draw 91 as your barrier?
The collapse of the Soviet Union. We don't have as much of an incentive to kind of meddle with South American affairs because we're not worried about them all falling to communism and then becoming, pawns against us like Cuba.
No, that's fine. That's a decent historical distinction. But I would still bring up, because these are the effectively the people who are sweeping for Trump doing this without an authorization for use of military force and or an authorization of Congress. They point to 3 things that are after 91. So they point to Obama's actions in Libya and Syria, and then they also point to the Kosovo intervention as well.
Okay.
So with Kosovo, we didn't have an AUMF. We just had like a moral mandate that Bill Clinton decided, relatively speaking, unilaterally. And then when we have Obama, he was citing the 2001, 2002 AUMF, but he was trying to actively depose 2 foreign leaders in the Middle East and North Africa, which no matter how you translate the AUMF, you pretty much can't get there without the most extreme of imaginations.
Sure. So what analysis, what paradigm are we analyzing here? Do we want the legal or do we want the ethical?
I'm going legal first, I think.
Okay, so for legal, I would have to go check the wording, but my understanding is that the AUMF has had pretty broad interpretation to apply to basically the entire, it's called the Greater Middle East North Africa region, typically what we refer to as like quote unquote the Middle East, but that like expands to Northern Africa and encompasses Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, stuff like that, Egypt, and then all the way east to places like Pakistan and Afghanistan. So legally, I'm pretty sure the AUMF covers that. I would also say that for Libya, we had a UN Security Council agreement on that. I don't think that China or Russia voted against intervention there, and I believe NATO was on board with that. I think for Kosovo, I think that was a NATO-led thing as well. And for Syria, I don't think we had official action on the ground in Syria, so I'd have to know more specifically what you're referring to when we say toppling Assad.
Well, let me reverse the argument real quick. So the reason why on Friday, whenever we did the incursion into Venezuela, I was ready to be like, this is Trump going off leash. This is him being totally psychotic. No other president has taken this drastic of military action without authorization from Congress. And then over the weekend, I started hearing historical arguments that effectively said the opposite, stretching back almost a century and probably arguably 200 years. And so that's where, for me, if you check the 2001, 2002 AUMF, we can take a look at it. It's only a page long. Within there, the key targets that are authorized are people who either participated in 9/11/2001, are people who like helped harbor people who were involved in 9/11/2001, or people who were participating in terrorist attacks against the United States, or were like imminently planning terrorist attacks against the United States. So if you wanted to say that Bashir al-Assad or Muammar Gaddafi were like planning imminent threats of terrorist attacks against the United States, you could claim that and then cover those actions under the AUMF. But I don't think that those are like substantiated by evidence. I think those would just be like post hoc claims.
Sure. But I mean, I would still argue that I don't think any of these actions were unilateral. I'm pretty sure Kosovo and Libya were both NATO missions. So
but what does unilateral have to do with it if what we're analyzing is an authorization from Congress in order to use military force? Because other people say we can do it, why if you want to go moral, we could say, well, we have a moral case for doing it, but why does other countries saying us doing military shit gives us the authorization to do it, when I think the argument has been Trump doesn't have an AUMF, he's stretching the shit out of the 2001 2002 AUMF, and he did this military action without the consent of Congress,
Well, I
or
think the big
arguably
issue
even
for-
consultation.
I think the big issue for Trump is that did Trump actually cite the authorization for using military force for Venezuela?
He cited it for Caribbean drone strikes. He basically reclassified them as terrorists, and then he said that the foreign terrorist orgs of Tren de Aragua and other narco terror organizations, therefore, were planning on perpetuating terrorist attacks against the United States. And then I think that's why he was, as stupid as it sounds, I think that's why he was arguing that fentanyl was a weapon of mass destruction, was because
so I think these are your issues when
you
you're
could
looking
declare
at the
them
difference.
terrorists engaging in terrorist activities against the United States.
Without dipping into the ethical stuff, I think this is your difference even in your legal pushing here. For Kosovo, for Libya, and for anything related to Syria, though I don't think we had official actions there. For Kosovo and Libya, I think you had strong arguments to justify some type of intervention in these places. For Venezuela, I think you are straining pretty hard there on the fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, and therefore there's terrorist activity that the U.S. is interested in. And I think it'd be unilateral.
Are we on moral or legal?
Well, no, I'm still kind of speaking to the legal thing. If you want to really dive into the legal thing, I would have to start. I would have to dig through the justifications that the Trump admin used.
I think it's broader than that. And can I give you an argument that Lactoid gave me?
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, hey, bro, everybody likes to cite Pisco because he's a lawyer. Lactoid passed the bar too, you know? So the thing that he was saying, that if you look back for the past 200 and some odd years.
Just as a real quick thing, my issue with Lactoid is he's similar to Ryan Mullally or whatever. Basically, if Donald Trump showed up and murdered and raped his mother's corpse, he would give you a really good reason why he did it, and he would defend it to the death. That's my issue with both of these people.
Yeah, maybe she sucked.
But go for it. Okay, go ahead. What are the argument that he gave?
Yeah. So the argument that he says is like, so if you go very early into the 1800s or whatever, presidents were already using the military for non-war functions, but still arguably acts of war, like the Barbary Pirate Wars or the Indian American Wars or skirmishes with Mexicans. And so, and I'm not saying Mexicans derisively, I'm actually referring to the state of Mexico. And so basically what he's saying is that the president is given broad authority as the chief of the military service or whatever to engage in every activity up to declared war. And that war is a specific state of declared hostilities between a nation, which is a people, and a state, which is a government. And basically, these nation states are agreeing that they are now in armed hostilities. Whereas with the United States, in reference to our policing action in Korea, our actions in Vietnam, our actions in Iraq and Afghanistan, et cetera, you could actually say that these weren't wars because we didn't declare hostilities against the nation states of Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, et cetera. We declared that we were going to engage in military action up to a certain degree. With and without Congress, by the way.
Okay, well, I don't understand. What is the point, or what is the point we're making here?
Is that the restraint of Congress on the president's capacity to engage in what we probably consider acts of war only starts once we're at the threshold of declaring open war on a rival nation state. And up to that threshold, the president has broad discretion. Okay,
so I think that this is problematic, but I think I probably agree. I think most people have given pretty broad deference to the president insofar as military actions or whatever. I think that the issue you run into, though, is that the invasion of Venezuela and then the abduction of their leader is basically the most you can be at war with a country. And that all happened absent any kind of congressional approval.
I think my pushback on that statement, though, is it's not. We could have bombed their Congress. We could have bombed their infrastructure. We could have killed more members of Congress. We could attack the infrastructure of their government systems. We could have, like, within the realm of warfare, you have to bear in mind that our last declared wars were, like, I think World War II. We were openly bombing civilian logistical structures because we knew it would dampen the war effort of the Germans.
Wait, but that was after war was declared, no?
Correct. But I'm saying, like, sorry if I misunderstood you, but it sounded like this is the most at war that we could be.
Basically, yeah.
But I don't agree with that. The most at war we could be is at war.
Well, taking out the leader of another country is like that's like it's the most aggressive acts you can do.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
for sure.
yeah,
if you're talking about like the
yeah.
threshold up to declared war, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an active war for sure.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, of all the things that you could do that would be considered like, oh, we're definitely at war. Oh, we're like, we're treading on war. Like, taking out a foreign leader, that's like, whoa, we're mega at war. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Sure, but the reason why people brought up Syria, Libya, and Panama is because in Panama we actually just did the same thing. We actually just took out Manuel Noriega. Then,
but didn't we have? Wait. Didn't Bill Clinton have approval from Congress for that though?
It was H.W. Bush, and I don't think so. My research actually shows that he didn't have it. The reason why Congress didn't reel him in was because the country of Panama had actually already declared war on us, and we had some kind of like mandate to protect the Panamanian Canal. And also there was a like a skirmish where a couple of American soldiers had been killed in the previous week. So they didn't call HW out for invading Panama, but it was still like the invasion itself was still a military action done without Congress, without an AUMF or a declaration of war. Weirdly enough, Panama, in my opinion, is the most historically analogous thing to what we just did in Venezuela.
Sure. I'm just going to read literally just these 4 intro paragraphs here. The United States invasion of Panama began in mid-December of 1989 during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. The purpose of the invasion was to depose the de facto ruler of Panama, General Manuel Noriega. He was wanted by U.S. authorities for racketeering and drug trafficking. The operation, codename Operation Just Cause, I guess, concluded in late January of 1990 with the surrender of Noriega. The Panama Defense Forces were dissolved, and President-elect Guillermo Andara was sworn into office. Noriega, who had long-standing ties to United States intelligence agencies, consolidated power to become Panama's de facto dictator in the early 1980s. In the mid-1980s, relations between Noriega and the U.S. began to deteriorate due to fallout of the murder of Hugo Spadafora, and the removal from office. I think that might be
an FBI agent or something. I would have to check out who that is.
Maybe. And the removal from office of President Nicolas Ardito Barletta. His criminal activities and association with other spy agencies came to light, and in 1989, he was indicted by federal grand juries on several drug-related charges. Negotiations seeking his resignation, which began under the presidency of Ronald Reagan, were ultimately unsuccessful. In 1989, Noriega annulled the results of the Panamanian general elections, which appeared to have been won by opposition candidate Guillermo Andara. President Bush responded by reinforcing the U.S. garrison in the Canal Zone, following the declaration of a state of war between Panama and the United States passed by the Panamanian General Assembly, as well as the lethal shooting of a Colombian-born U.S. Marine officer, Lieutenant Robert Paz, at a PDF roadblock. Bush authorized the execution of the Panama invasion plan. I would say the declaration of the state of war makes this quite different than where we're at right now between Venezuela and the United States.
I would agree that it's a variance difference. However, the argument that I've heard consistently from critics of this military action is that effectively, in order to engage in serious military action that could result in a hot war, the president should either have an AUMF or a declaration of war. And any time that he engages in an act of war without the consent of Congress, it's effectively a violation of the Constitution of the United States.
So I would respond with 2 points. So one, I would say, firstly, we're acknowledging there's a significant difference when the other countries actually super declared war on us, right? That's a substantial difference between this and Venezuela. And the second thing I would say is, for the language of the Alien Enemies Act and when that was passed, I am sympathetic to the concept of the president sometimes needing to respond quickly to a rapidly evolving situation. I believe, I don't know if it's in the Alien Enemies Act or something else. Like, I think the president basically gets like 3 months to do whatever, and then he has to go to Congress to try to get like some kind of approval or affirmation or to continue whatever thing. Because the idea is like if we're being invaded, like literally, like China is like sending ships over to the United States. Maybe it's like on a Saturday night, and we don't want to wait for Congress to vote to authorize, the deployment of our armed forces. The president needs to be able to act swiftly and quickly. Or if another country declares war on us and they're doing some crazy fuck shit, the president and the military might need to get to swing into action quickly, and there might be opportunities that only exist for days or maybe even hours at a time where the president needs to act. I would argue that and I think the argument has been in those cases, the president needs to be able to act sometimes before the approval of Congress, and that makes sense. But I don't think anything there is analogous with what was happening with Venezuela. I don't feel the same thing there. For this, I mean, it seems like
I can agree
Panama
with that.
declared war on us. Like they actually declared war, and then pretty quickly afterwards, I think we invaded and got their shit fucked.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would like to bring up there is that I don't think the Panamanian defense forces were capable of overcoming the U.S. garrison in Panama. I think that they probably did have time to seek out an AUMF or a declaration of war from Congress. However, like by doing that, you would be risking
Wait. Say that again.
I think HW, if he wanted to, he could have said, hey, we just had a shooting where a Lieutenant Robert Paz was killed. We also have increasing hostilities with the state of Panama. Their leader is illegitimate and a criminal. And also they're threatening the Panama Canal. I need an AUMF or a declaration of war in order to take action from Congress. I think he had time to do that. He could use exigent circumstances as a reason for why he didn't. But I'm saying that he had time to do that.
When you say he had time to do that, I don't know if I agree with that. They literally declared war on us. We had, how many people were living in that garrison and at the Panama Canal? Why would you risk all that?
Well, I don't think you would. I think you would use the exigent circumstances of the situation to say American lives are in imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. Therefore, we're going to take swift action.
Yeah. So I don't think so. He didn't have time. That needed to happen immediately, right?
It depends on how many American lives you're willing to risk.
0. I don't think we should have to risk if you can avoid it, right? Why would you risk any? They declared war on us.
Okay, but then here's the thing where you're saying, okay, so we're granting the president broad powers to take military action in order to engage against hostile actors who are hostile to us without the consent of Congress, as long as they can demonstrate like exigency.
Well, they declared war on us, and so we have people living there that could be under threat. If Maduro declared war on the United States, I think it would be fucking retarded. At that point, I would have personal issues with Trump, but I mean, at that point, what are you going to say? Like, fuck. I mean, James, you declare war on the U.S. and Trump takes you out. I mean, damn, how stupid do you have to be? Yeah,
Well, I think what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to shift the conversation from this was a unilateral, ahistorical, whatever thing. Where like, in order to do any kind of military action, the president needs an AUMF or he needs the consent of Congress. I'm trying to shift the liberal argumentation from that to no, it's bad because the exigent circumstances that Trump is using to decide why we're invading Venezuela are largely bullshit.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's even remotely similar, though. How many people?
I think, dude, you deposed a leader. You didn't have the consent of Congress. There were exigent circumstances. Like, what else do you need to be similar enough?
They declared war on us, and we had American lives that would have been at risk.
So, okay, hold on. Let me ask you this question because this might cut through the bullshit. Do you think that Trump could or should be impeached and or removed from office for his actions in Venezuela?
Yes.
Why? I'm gonna write these down real quick. Let me write these down while you say them. Why should Trump be impeached and removed from office for his unilateral actions in Venezuela?
Sure. I would say that everything, and there might even be individual things, you could say like there are 7 reasons, but everything related to the murdering of Venezuelan citizens in the ocean. So like blowing up all the boats or whatever, not showing any compelling evidence to Congress. If we were to believe Rand Paul when he was on Joe Rogan, Rand Paul said there wasn't even proof that those people were armed. So, and there's probably individual things you could even go further into. So like the double taps, people floating on some wooden planks for 42 minutes can land. But basically everything having to do with the murder of all of the citizens outside the coast of Venezuela. I would say
Okay.
is one reason. I would say for the second reason, I would say it would be the invasion and the deposing of a foreign leader for one, without any kind of congressional notification whatsoever. Two, without the pretextual reasons he gave were bad. Things like we're going to invade this country to take their oil is gross and disgusting on a billion different levels. And then I don't know if this is necessarily related to Venezuela now, depending on how much you want to stretch it. But three, I would say that the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act because of Tren de Aragua and using that to deport, illegal immigrants because of their ties to Venezuela, I think I was ridiculous as well. But I would say those three things are my big things. Yeah.
Okay. So where I'm with you is I think the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act is effectively a smokescreen. And also the pretextual reasons for our invasion of Iraq, or not Iraq, excuse me, Venezuela. The pretextual reasons of invading Venezuela are largely smoke and mirrors and bullshit. Okay. So I'm with you there. So out of the 5 things that you said, I'm with you on 2 of them. Okay. And maybe even 3. You also kind of started what you said with the totality of circumstances, which is just kind of like, that's like a given. Like we should evaluate everything within the totality of their circumstances. The other 2 things though that you said is blowing up of the civilian boats that are accused of drug trafficking that don't have weapons. I actually agree with you there.
Civilian, I think just the Venezuelan nationals, like even if they're criminals, you can't kill them with your military. But yeah, if I said civilian, I
don't know the laws behind, like, because they're civilian vessels, right? I don't know the enforcement mechanism besides impeachment and removal from office. I don't know the enforcement mechanism for saying like the president is currently invoking national security to kill random civilian vessels. I think it's fucked up, and I have no idea like the legal rationale for it. And I think it's like the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act and also designating Tren de Aragua as a terrorist organization. I think it's a thin pretext for murder. So I actually agree with you on that one. The one that I think is the weakest is the invasion and deposition of a foreign leader without congressional authorization.
Okay.
Well, but the reason why I bring that up is because for instance, like, we took sides in the Syrian civil war to depose Bashir al-Assad because it geopolitically fucked over Russia. And despite...
But we didn't do it, right?
What's that?
We didn't invade and depose Assad.
Well, I mean, I think we did have special forces on the ground that were embedded with Kurds and the Syrian Democratic Forces and all that kind of stuff. And the CIA and the special forces were definitely giving money and weapons to revolutionary militias. And then also we were doing airstrikes in order to favor different factions over different factions. Mostly we did it in order to attack ISIS, but I also think that we probably slipped in a few other airstrikes.
Yeah, I agree. But why didn't we just invade and depose Assad then, right?
Well, because it was too much blood and treasure, and Obama wanted to be viewed relatively peacefully compared to Bush.
Well, I think it would have been a step too far. I think that just would have been an inappropriate role for the United States.
Sure, but the AUMF doesn't cover deposing random leaders we don't like for geopolitical advantage.
Okay, and we didn't do that.
No, we did do that. Like the whole reason why we have a new leader in Syria right now is because we made the Syrian civil war so bloody that we exhausted the Russians and we exhausted the Assad regime to the point that they got deposed.
Yeah, but there's a thing to be said for the fact
Libya's even clearer. But sorry, continue.
Libya was that was a coalition though that was involved in that.
Sure, but we're still not talking about congressional authorization or an AUMF.
Yeah, that's fine, but there's something to be said that there's a different approach between proxy warfare and actual warfare, right? Absolutely. If somebody's engaged in proxy warfare, it's because they know that the actual warfare is a step too far. What Trump did in Venezuela was a step too far. If Trump was just supporting other groups there, then we would be having that conversation, but we're not. We're having a conversation about formal, uniformed U.S. armed forces invading another country and stealing their leader. We didn't do that in Syria.
Sure, but we did do Air Force strikes, and we did do special forces operations in northern Syria, particularly the Kurdish regions. Like we had American Special Forces, real quick, just because like there are details here. We had American Special Forces training Northern Iraqi and Northern Syrian Kurdish forces that then got into fights with Russian mercenaries, and we called in American air assets to destroy Russian mercenaries that were currently serving the Assad regime.
Yeah, but do you understand how many layers removed and how much messier that is than just the U.S. was bombing, Damascus and looking for Assad?
Sure, but I'm pretty sure we also bombed a Syrian air base in response to
chemical
them
weapons attacks,
bombing
right?
civilians.
Yeah, but like there's more clear reasons here that are articulatable. That's different than we just wanted to depose Assad, right?
I still think the end goal was deposing Assad.
That can be fine.
If you want to concede to the pretense, you can
thing.
concede to the pretense. But I still think the purpose was
the end goal. Yeah, but there's a difference between opposing somebody and deposing somebody, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, if we were supporting other groups in Venezuela to topple Maduro, I'm not even sure necessarily if I would be opposed to that.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to shift the argument a little bit though, because you said earlier that I think deposing a foreign leader is the maximum thing that you can do as an act of war up to the threshold of war. I'm not trying to misquote you, but I think that's something you said.
Well, I said I would be past that threshold. This is like you're clearly at war when you're deposing foreign leaders. Clearly.
Okay, I would argue that using American air assets to blow up the military infrastructure of another nation state is 100% an act of war. Like Syria, if we blew up their airbase, blowing up their military assets while they're fighting a civil war, they might not have declared a declaration of war against the United States of America. They would be 100% within their rights to.
I think that, like, if they declared war, I mean, I think I would agree with you there. But your cause for war here is so much different in terms of, like, it definitely has the dual benefit of helping what we would consider our geopolitical interests. But when we can point to, like, well, you guys are launching attacks against your own civilian population, and nobody seems to be disagreeing with that, and you're shooting at UN inspectors that are trying to come in to verify what's going on, it's just such a different set of circumstances to say that, like, we're bombing them just to get rid of Assad. And, like, we didn't, right? Assad wasn't gone until like a decade and a half later, No,
I mean, I agree, but I think we set up the circumstances because effectively what's happened is he is a former member of ISIS, but we have a Western friendly former member of ISIS who's taken over. He's made signals that he wants to, be friendly with Israel and the United States. And as far as I know, Russians lost. The reason why they're fighting for Crimea and the reason why they were fighting for Syria so hard was because of two of their warm water ports. I think one of them is either in like Tyre or something, or Tartus or something like that. It might be Tartus. But one of them is in Crimea, and I think it's Sevastopol. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But it's Sevastopol. The other one was in Tartus. So like this was always part of the game.
I don't disagree that it's serving these interests, but everything is so much different.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's do Libya real quick.
No, wait. Wait. We're hopping through so many different things. Okay, so for Syria, ISIS is forming in Syria. ISIS, at this point, I don't know if they'd already conducted foreign terrorist attacks already. Assad has lost control of the country, right? In such that there are swaths of the country that are literally controlled by ISIS. There are times when we are bombing Syrian airports, although it's in response to chemical weapon attacks against their civilian population. If Syria would have declared war against the U.S., I don't think anybody in the U.S. would be like, oh my God, that's horrible and evil. Like, they would have been within their right to do it. But I think us flying in and just, if we would have deposed Assad, I don't even know. I think the only reason we didn't is because we were still traumatized from Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't even know if I would have necessarily opposed U.S. doing it, but we didn't do it.
Well, are we talking about moral or legal, right?
Legal, even legal. But I'm trying to figure out, like, what the difference is, or I'm trying to figure out how this is at all comparable to Venezuela, who's not at war with us. They're not engaged in chemical weapon attacks against their people. There isn't like a blossoming terrorist network that's engaged in international terrorist attacks there. And then we were more aggressive with Venezuela than we were with Syria. Is there any fact here that I've laid out that you disagree with, or
no? But I think the saying that these things are qualitatively different for me doesn't change the calculus when it comes to Trump, because the chief criticism that I'm trying to shift you away from, as a matter of fact, I hope I didn't delete this. I did delete it. Give me 1 second.
Push Control Z it all the way.
Thank you. Okay. Number one, you said totality of circumstances, which I just agree with off the bat. We should always be evaluating the totality of circumstances at any point. You're correct. You said blowing up the boats. I can't think of a legal reason under an AUMF or even under the laws of war why we should be blowing up civilian vessels, even if we suspect them of criminals. I think you could probably impeach Trump for that. The other ones that you said that I kind of agree with are that the pretextual reasons are bad. So saying Venezuela is a part of an international terrorist organization because some of the oil from the shadow fleet is being sold in Iran in order to generate revenue for Hezbollah, right? Like we're so far removed from the AUMF of 2001, 2002 that Venezuela itself is not purposefully engaging in terrorist attacks against the United States. Therefore, the AUMF doesn't apply. Therefore, the argumentation is poor. And then also, when it comes to declaring drug traffickers terrorists and then declaring drugs weapons of massive destruction, that already feels incredibly flimsy. Okay. But the reason why you said invasion and deposing a foreign leader without congressional authorization was another thing that you said that you would be willing to try to impeach and remove Trump from office for. I am saying that is the weakest of the five, and it's arguable based off of historical precedent. That's what I'm trying to communicate.
I just don't see the historical precedent. Syria is not one because we didn't depose
once again
the leader.
With
Gaddafi could be maybe, but that was I think there was a UN thing that was okay.
But the UN
with
is in Congress. Why the fuck do we're a nation state? Why do we give a fuck what a foreign country says that the United States can invade another country? What the fuck does that have to do with Congress?
I would have to go see what Congress approved back at that point in time. But
for me, I don't think that a foreign authorization or a foreign moral mandate for the president of the United States to engage in a military action has anything to do with what we could or should do. I think that the argument from a lot of anti-Trump people is that in order for the United States to conduct itself legally and morally, then it needs an authorization of use of military force from Congress, or it needs a declaration of war, or it's illegal. And I'm saying, looking at historical precedent, that doesn't seem to be true.
Well, does our Congress have to authorize UN Security Council resolutions, or? Because otherwise,
why would the UN say, well, hold on, let's do an example here. Kosovo, okay? And if you want to make it hypothetical, we can make it hypothetical.
The exact example we're talking about, just Libya.
Okay, so let's say UN says, hey, NATO says, we think it's based that the United States does military action in Libya. We think it's cool. We think there's a moral mandate for the United States to do it. And legalistically, we don't give a fuck. Go bomb Muammar Gaddafi until he has no armed forces. And then Congress says, meh, like, we still don't have an AUMF that justifies the action.
Yeah, hold on. This is what I'm trying to, what I don't understand. When we say that, like, the NATO says it's going to do something and the UN Security Council agrees to do something, the United States is a part of both of these things. What part of the United States is saying yes? Is there not like a Senate? Is it just the president is who represents us in the United Security Council and the NATO?
I'm sure we have like diplomats or representatives or whatever, but I still think that...
Well, this matters because, like, my understanding is, I shouldn't remember the articles because you always sound so smart when you're like, Article 1 powers. Is Congress Article 1? Doesn't Congress have the sole authority to authorize treaties or some bullshit? Is like the UN Security Council, does that count as like a congressional thing? I don't know. Does Congress...
Oh, so what? I think I see what you're saying. So you're saying that if we signed on to the UN Charter... and if we signed on to the NATO Charter, and then in order to reinforce those charters, Congress has already said that we signed on to those charters, that by de facto is congressional authorization.
not de facto, de jure, that like they would actually.
Sorry,
have
I
to
actually
vote.
don't. I actually don't read legalistic language, so
Oh,
I was
you're
just
fine.
saying shit.
De facto is like it's like a thing that basically in effect it basically is this thing, and de jure is like it literally like you sign on to like this thing. So somebody says like he's the de facto leader of Nambambwanmi, that means that he's like the general with the strongest troops and he's got it, blah blah blah. But then let's say there's a guy who's like voted as the leader. Well, that guy is democratically, he's elected, that is the de jure leader. But you can have a difference where like the de jure leader is this guy who's voted, but the de facto leader is this military commander. That's just the difference in these two. But I'm saying that,
I
like,
think
yeah.
that question that you just asked, not only is it a good question, I think it would need to be resolved one way or the other in this conversation, and I could be wrong.
Okay, yeah, I'm not.
So signing on to the UN. So for instance, one of the things that's cited for the Korean conflict is that the United Nations passed a resolution for the Korean conflict. So therefore, we didn't have a declaration of war or declaration of AUMF, but the president at the time, I don't know if it was Eisenhower, it was Truman or something. But somebody in the 50s basically said, it's a police action. The United States is in the best position to do something about it. We're going to do something about it. And based off of this UN mandate, I'm going to do something about it. Now, I don't know if that's Congress being lazy and they should have declared an AUMF or declared a state of war, or if actually by us being a signatory to the UN Security Council, it's presumed that the president can unilaterally do military action on behalf of the UN Security Council because we've signed on to the UN. I actually literally do not know if that's true. One way or the other, for me or against me.
I'm not 100%.
Yeah, so it's something we can research. It's something we can figure out later. Do you want to talk about Libya at all specifically?
No, I was just, but that was just the example we're going with. But
the main reason why I want to bring that up is because the accusations against Muammar Gaddafi are, once again, he's attacking his civilians wantonly in order to maintain despotic power. He's been a dictator for decades. He's not a legitimate ruler. And then also, like, the moral argument is that I don't know what the hard evidence is, but allegedly there's enough evidence to tie him to the 1983 Lockerbie bombing, where a civilian airliner traveling over Scotland was blown up with US citizens on board. And then ultimately Libya like admitted fault and paid some level of like civil restitution, but it was still viewed as Muammar Gaddafi authorized jihadist terrorism. But that's the thing. That's 1983, not 2001. And that's also something that the Libyan government already paid some level of like civil restitution for. So how are we using that as, oh, well, Muammar Gaddafi is a jihadist terrorist, therefore we can take him out under the 2001, 2002 AUMF?
Okay. I would have to I would just need more of the legal background on this. To have a stronger opinion on it, but okay.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up as analogs. While we're at it, I think we basically just landed on, I'm not saying if you're, I'm done. That's all I wanted to get across to you. If you wanted to dig into more nitty gritty on this topic, we could. The other thing that I wanted to get into was the ICE shooting.
Oh boy.
It's okay. I mean, I think it's actually really straightforward, but I mean...
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So, Pisco's arguments that I have considered, that I think are worth analyzing, are twofold. One is officer-created jeopardy. I think that's an interesting legal theory. I think the other one is the deadly force used going to actually decrease the chances of imminent threat or death or great bodily harm, or are you exacerbating the scenario? But to my knowledge, officer created jeopardy and also this evaluation of whether or not deadly force actually will statistically decrease the threat of any given situation, that's not law. That's like moral argument that should maybe be enshrined in law.
Repeat the last two things.
Officer created jeopardy. Yeah. So that's a police officer.
No, I'm aware of that. The one that you just said about yeah.
And then the other thing is, if you use deadly force, is that deadly force actually going to reduce the threat of death or great bodily harm, or does it have no effect, or does it have a negative effect?
Okay.
So like you're driving a truck towards me, I shoot at you, but the momentum is so high already that like my bullets aren't going to do shit even if I kill you. So as a result, like I shouldn't fire because I'm taking a huge risk of both your life but also anybody in the background. Whereas, it's not like I don't have the means to stop you in a logical sense. So I
Okay.
shouldn't fire, which I don't think is the law of the land. It's actually moral argumentation.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought you were saying some. I mean, I didn't watch it, but people were telling me that you were getting pretty spicy about it earlier in the week.
I guess listen, you should come back tomorrow. We can argue this point, okay? I want to read. I need to read this Barnes versus Felix case because it's a.
We can fight about it later for sure. Can I kind of tell you what I read for the summary for 2025?
Sure, go for it.
So they are not. The Supreme Court has not made a ruling on officer-created jeopardy yet. They kicked back a detail of the case. And so officer-created jeopardy has not been enshrined into law yet. It's they're actually saying, hey, we can't make a fair assessment based off of this thing that the lower court hasn't considered. You have to go consider this lower thing before we take a look at it again.
Okay.
So, but Barnes versus Felix. Sorry, go ahead.
On a broader point, I guess. Then, what is your feeling? I guess, and we could just kind of like deal with the ethical or the moral part of it. You think that an officer? My issue with the fact pattern here is that like there's a car that's stopped. I'm a police officer. I can step in front of the car. If I step in front of the car, there are a multitude of situations that can happen after this. Anywhere ranging from the person could try to kill me to the person could just try to escape. Every single one of these situations is going to authorize me to kill the person, and I don't have a compelling reason to step in front of the car. Do you think it's ever justified for the cop to step in front of the car then?
So talking about moral or legal, yeah, there's absolutely moral reasons why you could step in front of the car. So for instance, like if it was a violent felony, if there was a robber who had already killed someone or a kidnapper who had somebody in the vehicle, yeah, there's going to be reasons or moral reasons where you could step in front of the car for sure. And then legal reasons are kind of like arguable, I suppose. But let's say that like there's no other means of approach. You have a kidnapper, he's in a vehicle, and there's vehicles to other sides, right? And you know that there's a child in the car that you want to try to save.
Okay, I'll grant you that, but like, yeah, I'll grant you this. But clearly this doesn't apply here. Like, if there is a way for you to approach the vehicle otherwise, if you're not literally forced to, they're not parked at the end of a long tunnel where it's just one way out, they're going to drive in front of you. Like, is there any reason ever to step in front of a vehicle like that?
No. And I think that's where officer cause jeopardy is a interesting idea. But before you start arresting and incarcerating cops for officer cause jeopardy, you have to write the case law, set the precedent, and you have to completely change the way that law enforcement officers are trained. Because the only way they're trained right now is imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. You can pull your gun and kill someone. That's all the training is. So they're not doing.
But also, I think for all the training, I've never seen cops step in front of cars before. We watch a lot of cop stop on the stream, and I don't think we see cops.
No, I agree. I think Wick even brought up that the CBP was accused in the early 10s of stepping in front of vehicles on purpose to cause shootings. Now, I don't know if that's true. I haven't researched it at all. But yeah, like I think this guy also got dragged. Right? Didn't he get dragged like a year ago and he got 12 stitches or something? Or am I just repeating internet?
He did. Yeah.
If he got dragged, then he should have known stepping in front of the vehicle the first time that he was putting himself into jeopardy, let alone the second time. The second time is fucking crazy. Like, if anything, I think officer cause jeopardy legislation needs to come out of the Renee Good shooting.
Okay, wait, but I'm ignoring the legal part of it. So ethically, it seems like the guy's kind of in the wrong, no?
Yeah. I think that civilians have, like, when they're being lawfully detained by a law enforcement officer, they have a duty to surrender. But I also think that officers have a moral duty, not a legal duty. They have a moral duty not to intentionally or negligently exacerbate a situation that leads to somebody's injury or death.
Okay. Where would our big disagreement be?
I would just say that it seems like Pisco, God bless him. It seems that, like, Pisco and other characters are acting like officer cause jeopardy is already the law of the land, or that this moral consideration of whether or not you firing is actually going to have an intended effect is either already the law of the land or already a part of police training, and therefore this guy should be charged and incarcerated. Whereas I think I made a bet on my stream, or I said I'd be willing to make a bet on my stream. 99.9, I don't think this guy's getting charged at the federal level. 99.9, I don't think he's getting hit for violations of policy. But you could say, oh, well, that's because of the Trump admin. I'm saying it's like, I'm going to put it 80-20. He's not getting charged at the state level. And I'm putting it at 99-1. He's not getting incarcerated at the state level.
Sure, but I think that has way more to do with political stuff right now than legal stuff. But okay, I can't argue the legal stuff yet. I'll read this case and I can do it tomorrow or the day after if you want. But
okay, well, I mean, we might be on the same page if I say that, like, morally this is criticizable, but legally we should create case law out of Renee Good and Felix versus Barnes so we don't have shit like this in the future. But people were telling me that you were like, this guy should be incarcerated and he should be euthanized.
I don't think euthanized, but I mean, I do feel like the guy murdered her. Yeah.
Okay, but do you feel like he murdered her through officer cause jeopardy?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's like more moral than it is legal right now. Although I guess you could read Barnes and maybe you come up with a different.
Yeah, maybe I'm different. I would be surprised if the legality, because I know for self-defense stuff, these are all factors that are heavily considered. Like, I'm pretty sure that if I were to, like, if we were going out and I were to approach you and I were to start to fight you or whatever, or I were to start talking a ton of shit, or I were to, like, provoke the fuck out of you, and then you go to hit me, and you're obviously a few inches taller than me, I would say, based on our encounters in real life, and I would pull out my gun and shoot and kill you. I think it cuts against my self-defense argument pretty substantially if I'm the one that provoked the incident. I think it can take away your self-defense argument entirely.
It can.
Actually, and it did for the Ahmaud Arbery people or whatever.
Yes, it did for the Ahmaud Arbery. Brilliant association, by the way. I forgot he existed for a second. But, okay, here's my but. The legal execution of duties is going to heavily weight it in the favor of the state. So the cop, regardless of whether or not he steps in front of a vehicle, regardless of whether or not he does officer cause jeopardy, he has a lawful purpose, which is to detain a lawbreaker or investigate a lawbreaker, which does not give the civilian the right to either resist arrest and or flee the scene.
Yeah, I don't think we're arguing that at all.
Okay. Well, but that's what I'm saying is, like, when it comes to current case law, once again, I think officer cause jeopardy should become a thing and should be written intentionally, very intelligently. But I'm saying, based off of the law of the land, I don't think that you're going to be able to argue that an officer engaged in the lawful performance of his duties cannot take risks in order to effect an arrest, because the nature of law enforcement in general is risky.
Well, but
you're detaining people and you're taking away their freedom. That by itself is a risk.
No, that's not true, because there are things that you can do as a police officer, even in the performance of your duty, that can like, at the very least, like, they could clear the other person killing you. The guy that shot
if you don't
back
identify
when
yourself.
Yeah, when Breonna Taylor got killed or whatever, the boyfriend that shot back, I believe he wasn't charged with anything. I think officers did a no-knock raid on another, it was an African-American dude's house. This was like a fucking 5 or 6 years ago. And I think he shot and killed the cop. And I think he got off just fine because he had no idea. So, I mean, like, there are things that you could do to put yourself in danger as an officer, and then you can get killed and the other person could be exonerated completely.
Yeah, but you're going to, specifically, if we're keeping this to the Renee Good case, you're going to have problems with that, because she has uniformed people with like markings on their uniforms. She has a cop walking past her car. She even acknowledges, oh, I'm not even mad at you. So she clearly knows, who or what they are. He's videotaping her and her license plate, so she already knows that whatever legal trouble she's in, she's in. And then despite that fact, despite knowing that there is and by the way, we could even check out the cell phone camera footage. In the cell phone camera footage, while she's cutting her wheel to the right, she sees that the officer is in front of the vehicle. So you could argue that just as reckless and stupid the officer is being by stepping in front of the vehicle, she's being reckless and stupid by attempting to flee and elude law enforcement officers while there's a cop standing in front of her car.
Well, that's true. The recklessness would relieve the officer of his defense of just performing his duty, right? You can't be, if you're reckless in the... Well, no, I'm saying from a legal standpoint, if you're doing something with reckless disregard, then you've lost the defense of your occupation for doing so. Like, cops have pretty broad leeway insofar as they can attack or kill people as part of their job. But once they've exceeded some standard of behavior, they no longer have that protection, like the George Floyd thing, right? Like,
I would say okay, I could be wrong. Maybe I could eat these words in a few days, but I would say you need to establish this case law.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This is, if it's just a legal question, I'm not sure. I'll read this case and I'll come back.
No, and morally, I'm with you. Officer created jeopardy is 100% a valid moral argument from my perspective. I've even seen officer created jeopardy in person before, where a guy basically he got an arrest of a homeless person, but he did everything by the book, quote unquote. He was using de-escalatory language. He was using a calm tone. He was doing all the things that the policy or the law states. He followed the law. He followed the policy. But what this cop did, and my supervisor and I actually like criticized the fuck out of him afterwards. He was displaying body language that seemed aggressive to somebody that was mentally unstable. So while he's saying the right things and using de-escalatory language, he's still approaching a guy who's mentally unwell, in my opinion, to trigger him on purpose so he can get an arrest. And I think that not only is that morally incorrect, effectively, like, policy and law should be rewritten to show that, like, officers should not be able to antagonize members of the public to get them to commit crimes, so officers have a pretext to use force on them.
Okay, yeah. I can't speak. I just know what the law is, so I'm hearing what you're saying. I just don't know what the prior.
Well, then we don't need to loop, but that was the main things that I wanted to call in about and discuss.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I'm sorry I missed the celebrations this weekend. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss while we're here?
I got another chatter who wants to tango with you a bit about the Venezuela thing.
Okay. I mean, is he jumping on, or he just want to DM me on Discord, or what?
I think he's coming in here.
Okay. I mean, I can hang out. I still got.
Oh, there he is.
40 minutes.
Hello.
Hello. One second. I'll be right back. What you guys did? Let me go to drink. Hold on.
Hello, Connor. I'm not necessarily that interested in the Venezuela thing purely, but I was interested in mostly your analogies. I feel like your analogies were not strong, especially in terms of like the Syrian one. Do you want to restate what you said, or can I just go off what I heard from listening?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. Wait, real quick, before you guys do this, I'm sorry, because I see some people typing in chat. In my mind, and I could be wrong, but I haven't heard a convincing argument otherwise, all three shots are going to be analyzed the exact same. I seriously doubt there's going to be an analysis of that incident that separates shots 1 from 2 and 3. All of these shots happened pretty quickly in succession. It's not like it was like 1 and then 10 seconds and then 2 and then 10 seconds and 3. My guess is whatever anybody decides for shot 1 is also going to apply to 2 and 3. It was a very, very, very quickly done thing. That would be my take on that, but okay. All right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to restate it. Hi. I'd like to restate it. That way, hopefully we can deal with each other's steel mans. So
okay.
What I would say is for Syria and for Libya, it seems pretty clear that our military interventions were in the attempts to depose Bashir al-Assad and Muammar Gaddafi. And if you look at the 2001, 2002 AUMFs, they basically say that we can act against jihadist terrorist organizations that are a threat to the United States. And so from my perspective, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. depending on the language of the AUMF, I don't think the United States would classify Bashar al-Assad as a jihadist terrorist organization, nor that he funded jihadist terrorist organizations. He was explicitly like a secular, very nationalist, like Alawite, supremacist type of regime that was explicitly fighting against like ISIS and other like more conservative Islamic forces within Syria and Iraq and Lebanon.
I agree with your description so far.
Okay, so sorry, continue. I just want to cut you off for a second.
No. So the strongest argument that I think you could make for Bashir al-Assad supporting jihadist organizations was that during the Iraq war, he encouraged jihadist groups in his own country to go to Iraq to fight coalition forces. But that feels pretty weak to me.
I guess my curiosity on that would be that when you talk about like, I feel like definition is very important here. When you talk about jihadist terrorist organizations, when people say that, especially in the American lens, they're usually talking about Sunni, mostly Salafi terrorist organizations that are explicitly against forces like Iran, forces like Saudi Arabia, or kind of against Saudi Arabia and mostly against the United States. And like, I could be honest, I could be wrong, but when you say Bashar al-Assad sent jihadist terrorist organizations to Iraq to fight against their regime, the American-backed regime, my mind goes to it would be like Shia terrorist organizations fighting against the regime.
No, I think it would be Sunni, and I don't think he explicitly sent them. I don't think he gave them money. I don't think he gave them weapons. I think he looked at it as a two birds, one stone scenario, where he says, oh, if you're an extremist in my country and you hate me and you hate, modernism and you hate this and you hate that, go to Iraq. There's a bunch of Americans that you can fight if you think we're all great Satan or something like that. It would have been like the way that I heard it contextualized was effectively like public statements. I don't think he offered them material support. And then also this ended up being sorry, real quick. Interesting historical fact. Interesting historical fact is that these forces allegedly went to the Iraq conflict and fought against coalition forces. Well, that's actually what blooded them and made them more veteran military forces, which is why they were the most competent military forces during the Syrian war, because they had experience from the Iraq conflict. Anyways, just interesting historical.
Yeah, no, that's probably I would guess that would be true, because when you also, another thing relating to what you said earlier, you said Ahmed al-Shara, he was like an ISIS guy. That is explicitly like just not true. He was the head of al-Nusra, and al-Nusra was more aligned with al-Qaeda than it was aligned with ISIS. While it is true that many of al-Nusra's fighters went on to join ISIS, that was because of split between al-Shara and al-Baghdadi and al-Zahri. That through a split where al-Shara or al-Jalani, as he was called, went and sided with al-Qaeda. That's the reason many of people within al-Nusra went and fought with Baghdadi. And
I'll admit I was probably fast and loose, but also if you tell like an American, like I'm almost 40, if you tell an American like, hey, we're going to go kill ISIS, they'd be like, awesome. And then they're like, oh, we're going to go kill al-Qaeda affiliates. We'd be like, awesome. Because it is kind of like, I get it's different things, but to a lot of people, al-Nusra is al-Qaeda and ISIS is similar enough to al-Qaeda that it's not one thing, but it seems like one thing to an outsider.
Yeah, to an outsider, that would be true. But like, it isn't like the most perfect world where we like kind of like look at these conversations and try to have the best conversation possible. Because like if like, okay, let's use this analogy. Like if a retard is just like, oh, Bush and like Trump, they're like the same thing. That's like they have same like ideological roots almost, but it's the same thing with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. ISIS, it's another analogy is like the difference between like Trotsky and Stalin, where Stalin, he kind of wanted socialism in one country, and not Trotsky, and Lenin wanted like worldwide revolution, etc. Like that dichotomy.
Yeah, sure. ISIS wanted a global, or they wanted to start local, but eventually form a pan Middle Eastern, North African caliphate, whereas Al-Qaeda was an international organization that had like limited international terrorist goals in order to set things forth in motion. And I don't think Al-Qaeda had any aspirations of like governance. They were more like a militaristic terrorist organization. So I agree that the conflation. But then my question is, what's the beef? Because the main thing that I'm trying to say, because I actually wrote down the 5 points that Steven said, is that 3.5 of them I think are potentially impeachable. or they're at least like worthy of moral or legal condemnation. I think I had them written down somewhere. What I was saying, though, is that specifically, because I do remember the one that I was saying that is specifically the most important, the specific one is that I think that if you are going to impugn Donald Trump for taking unilateral military action in that are acts of war, then you have to look at 250 years of American executive history and see that a lot of our presidents have done acts of war without the consent of Congress, not an AUMF, not even a declaration of war. They just did that shit.
Yeah, but like what my point is, the examples you're using is they're not very strong examples. Like even the Panamanian one, the Panamanian junta, they declared war on the United States. I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna like appeal,
what does that have to do with the two? But here's the two factors, though, because this is the argumentation that I consistently hear: is that the president of the United States, when engaging in acts of war, should get the consent of Congress either through an AUMF or through a declaration of war. Otherwise, it's illegal and impeachable. I don't know if you agree with that last part, because if it's illegal and impeachable, then we basically have 200 to 250 years of presidents who have violated this concept.
Yeah, but like my main issue with you right now, I'm not hating, but like it's just like when you say 250 years, all of the events across the 250 years exist within certain contexts of what was happening. You cannot draw a complete analogy. Like it's not completely analogous. What happened in Venezuela today and what happened in Panamania in the 80s and what happened in North Africa in the 1700s. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I want to see whether or not you agree with this statement, absent context from the series of conflicts that we've engaged in over the past 200 years. Just this sentence and this sentence alone.
Okay.
In order to comply with the Constitution of the United States, the president must seek the authorization of Congress either through an authorization or a declaration of war, or military actions that he has done are illegal and therefore impeachable. Is that statement true or not?
I think it is broadly true. Yes, it is true.
Okay, so if you think that statement is true, that is a sentence standing alone, separate from the context of various conflicts. So now we start adding in the conflicts where I understand, like, oh, there's a lot of nuances to these conflicts, whatever. Okay,
but the nuance is so important, though.
But the nuances don't affect the statement that you just agreed to. You just agreed to that if military actions are done and they can cause war, because these are acts of war, and you do not have the authorization of Congress and you do not have a declaration of war, they are illegal and therefore impeachable.
Yes, as someone who follows institutional liberalism in terms of geopolitics, that is a standard we should hold ourselves to, or the West should hold ourselves to, in terms of military conflict. We cannot go around acting like Russia or China or any like third world like a shithole country and just be like invading countries without the authorization of not only our own legislature or even the authorization of the UN. That's not. We live in a rules-based world order.
Okay. But what I'm telling you is I could go to the Barbary Pirate War. I could go to the Indian American Wars. I can go to the Banana Wars. I can go to a dozen wars in the 19th century alone. And I can go to a dozen wars in the early 20th century. And the statement that we made together, which is the president cannot conduct acts of war without an authorization for use of military force or an act of Congress. And therefore, he is liable to be impeached and removed from office. That statement is not true in the 19th century, in the early 20th, in the middle 20th, in the late 20th, in the early 21st. It's just not true historically.
The Barbary Pirate Wars were authorized by Congress
after he had already taken action without Congress.
Okay, well, you want to fuck? Okay, let me read this actually. Like, Congress. Okay, just this is the Wikipedia. I'm not going to be like a wiki warrior, but Declaration of War and Naval Blockade. Just before Jefferson's inauguration in March 1801, Congress passed naval legislation that, among other things, provided for 6 frigates that shall be officered and manned as the President of the United States may direct. In the event of a declaration of war on the United States by the Barbary powers, these ships were to protect our commerce and chastise their insolence by sinking, burning, or destroying their ships and vessels wherever you shall find them. It's like,
right. But he had
yes,
already deployed. And by the way,
yes.
this is where like the War Powers Resolution of 1973, I think reasserts Congress's authority over acts of war. Okay. So
Okay.
what you and I agreed to should be true. And
It
yet,
should be true.
and yet,
But like, okay.
well, no. I mean, all I was going to say is we have Grenada, we got Lebanon, we got Somalia, we have Haiti, we have like, dude, I could go down another like half dozen things where the president leapt before he looked, and he was not impeached, and he was not removed from office.
Okay. My main point is that you I feel like the issue I'm having with you right now is you're jumping around to like different, not saying jumping, like you're going to like different examples. But if we just like narrow it on one example, like I don't think like there's a broad,
pick which
like,
one you like.
Okay, like even the ones you use like Panama, like it's like the analogy you're presenting between Venezuela and like these other conflicts. I'm saying it exists within the context of what's happening. So like for Panama, you listed as such, they declared war upon the United States. In the Barbary Pirates War, there was explicit authorization by Congress. Like we can look into these, but at the same time, I just
after the fact.
Okay, so okay, even granted after fact, you're saying what you're saying is that throughout history, presidents have been kind of like acting without the authority of Congress and declaring war and invading and like kind of fighting against. Like,
well, they're not declaring war. They're saying that what they're doing is
actually engaging in acts of war.
Well, yes, acts, but that's an important difference because effectively there was, again, you could ask Lactoid, but there was a argument about Obama's use of the AUMFs and military force in Libya and Syria in the 2010s. And effectively, what this like legal author said, I would have to ask Lactoid for the thing, but what the legal author said is that Congress is explicitly told that they have the right and ability to declare war. But war within this context is specifically a state of open hostilities between a nation, which is a people, and a state, which is a government. So you have a nation state saying that we are hostile to this nation state. We are in a state of armed conflict. That is war. Whereas if you look at what Obama did in Libya and Syria, we were actually not declaring war on the nation at all. We claimed that we were advocating on behalf of the nation. We are actually taking sides in a civil war because we want what's best for the nation. And we didn't even declare war on the state. We actually did acts of war within a limited frame in order to shift things towards our geopolitical ambitions. Therefore, this is not a state of war. Therefore, Obama does not need the consent of Congress in order to engage in this action. And that argument, while instinctively, morally, it feels wrong, okay? It feels wrong based off of our understanding of the Constitution of the United States and where war powers reside. It seems historically correct.
What I would say to that is essentially that, okay, even if I grant you the thing that like, okay, they have been acting like this in the past, I don't think that is necessarily justifying what is happening in the present with Venezuela. And like, okay, even I take some issue with the way you're framing like the Libyan intervention. Like, I don't think it was purely for the geopolitical ambitions of the United States that the United States overthrew Libya, or that the United States attempted to assist rebels in Syria. Like
but then likewise, couldn't we argue that our intervention in the Caribbean now is not just because we want to intervene and depose Maduro and the socialist regime of Venezuela? It's also because we want to enforce energy security and energy sanctions that are already on the books. And it's also because we want to stop drug trafficking north. Now, you can view these as fig leaves. You could view these as just pretexts that are very flimsy. And I would agree with you that they're relatively flimsy, but couldn't couldn't a earnest Republican or a earnest Trump cultist genuinely believe that these are additional pretexts that lend their arguments morally correct?
Possibly. I would just wait. Can you repeat that so I can fully understand what you're saying?
What I understood you to say, and I'm not saying that I'm totally correct in my understanding, but what I understood you to say is that regime change in Libya and Syria were not our only motivations. There were other motivations like preventing.
I'm not even saying that Libya.
Well, I was gonna, but I think these are good examples. Preventing the proliferation of weapons and use of weapons of mass destruction. That's a reason to intervene in Syria. Also, to clamp down on ISIS and to make sure that Yazidis and Kurds weren't massacred wholesale. Those are also two noble ambitions of the intervention in Syria. In reference to Libya, it's to make sure that Muammar Gaddafi, who's the psychopathic dictator that's been in charge for 50 years, who's been in charge of terrorism, it's to make sure that he doesn't massacre the entire, vast swaths of his own people. These are noble ambitions that contextualize these conflicts that are more than just regime change. But I am saying that if you look at Venezuela, you can have a similar moral argument for why the despotic Maduro regime is abusing its own people and how they've done, they've engaged in this warfare that's made, or these actions that have made sanctions necessary, and they engage in narco trafficking, which kills hundreds of Americans every year. You can make like a multivariant moral analysis of all of these topics, and it doesn't change anything.
Okay.
Especially if you're like an earnest Republican who drinks the Kool-Aid.
Yes, but if you're an earnest Republican who drinks the Kool-Aid, you probably have a bunch of previous beliefs that influence you on.
Yeah, which is probably that Trump's right about everything, which means you're going to be an idiot about everything. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like post hoc motivated reasoning. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just what I'm trying to say. This might actually cut through the flack a little bit.
Okay.
I'm trying to say that Steven thinks that Trump is impeachable for 5 reasons. Okay. And I've heard one of those reasons cited the most. And I'm saying that I agree with 3.5 of those reasons.
Wait,
and
just as
one
a
of those reasons.
I thought that this was a general liberal thing. My contention is not usually on the legal side. It's that everything was pretextual about this in terms of his invading to steal oil. It undermines the stability of our hemisphere. It damages relationships with the United States and everything. These are generally, just to be clear. But you can go. Not a
so there might be more overlap than I'm saying. But like, the one argument that I think that liberals and progressives are currently making that is going to be nigh on impossible to achieve in an impeachment proceeding, even if the Democrats get a majority in the House and Senate, is Donald Trump acted without authorization from Congress in a military way. Therefore, he is impeachable and we should remove him from office based off of that action. That is the weakest argumentation. It's the least likely to happen. And if you look at historical precedent, it doesn't seem like Congress is very interested in changing that.
I mean, okay. I think that was I didn't necessarily come in here to like discuss the Venezuela thing specifically. I just came.
Yeah, you just heard that I called Giuliani and what I called him a fucking ISIS member, and he was an al-Nusra member, and you were like, this guy's a fucking idiot and he doesn't know what he's talking about. I get it.
I didn't call you a fucking idiot. I would never call you an idiot.
Okay, use the R slur.
I just have
use ableist slurs in order to impugn my character.
I'm a left winger, but I just have so many issues with your framing. I just don't know how to communicate them. Can I?
Well, but I think you have problems with my framing though, because I don't think you have a problem with what I'm saying. I think you have a problem with my framing, because realistically, what's happening, because we're so fucking sorry if I'm getting passionate, but we're so cucked in politics now that if you hear somebody saying something that's true, that's inconvenient to your political direction, then you think that the other person is joining the other side in order to fuck over your team. But there are like 3 of us left in the online political sphere that are just saying things that we think are true because we think they're true. It's not because we're trying to like, I'm not trying to maneuver for Trump to win. I want this motherfucker to like do a hard handshake, get bruised, have the bruise get infected, and then for him to die of like sepsis. That's what I want. But when I hear liberals making bad arguments, I'm going to call them out because they're contradictory to the cause of, number one, truth, but also number 2, having an efficacious political argument that actually sees the end of the MAGA movement.
Okay. I just don't even know how to even to begin with to engage with some of the. I guess I'll just have to like read more into like the. I would have to read more into like the specific like interventions in Libya. Then I think I know quite a bit about Syria, but I guess for you. I think I want to read more about like Obama's justification for the war in Syria, because you did mention the fact that you're bringing up like this is a regime change, and despite all these other factors, if I'm characterizing you correctly, despite all these other factors, you're saying that it doesn't matter and it's still a regime change, and you can make that analogy with Venezuela. Is that
correct? It's the first statement that I kind of got you to agree to, which is, if the president takes military action without an AUMF or a declaration of war, it is illegal, therefore impeachable, and a president can be removed for office for doing so. I'm saying, and not just take that in isolation. Do we think that's true? Then if we think that's true, then we need to go through Barbary Pirate Wars, Indian Wars, Lebanon, Grenada, all that kind of stuff. And we need to find all the ones where we don't have an AUMF and we don't have a declaration of war from Congress. And then we need to figure out why presidents weren't previously impeached and removed from office for said actions.
When you say Lebanon, are you referencing the bombing during the Lebanese Civil War that killed a bunch of American troops?
Yeah, I think that what might have happened is I think that there was like a UN resolution to stop the Lebanese Civil War. I don't remember whether or not we got authorization from Congress. I think we might have. But then we went into Beirut, and then and then like 300 of our guys got blown up in a truck attack, and then we withdrew. But almost immediately after that, I bring up Lebanon, even if it's authorized by Congress. But the thing that happened immediately after that was Reagan was taking a hit in the polls because he was viewed as a cuckold. And so he used that as a pretext in order to invade Grenada. And to my knowledge, we did not have an AUMF or a declaration of war for the Grenada intervention.
Okay. That's
so if you find like Lebanon, you're like, oh, I own Lebanon on this. We actually had a declaration of authorization of use of military force on Congress on August 20th, whatever, that just moved to Grenada. And then Grenada, I think, is a stronger example of mine.
Okay, that's fair.
All right, cool. Well, I was going to ask Case if they had anything for me or if they were here for Steven. And then based off of that, I was going to decide what I'm doing next.
I am here for Steven, but I do have a question for you. Which Game of Thrones character is Hussein?
Oh my god.
Wait. Is which one? Saddam Hussein?
No, Hussein, the one in the call.
Oh, Hussein. Hussein would have to tell me. Hussein, are you a DGG bannerman? Are you loyal to DGG, or are you a liberal or a progressive? Are you unaffiliated? What are you?
I'm a DGG bannerman, but I'm quite left-leaning.
Okay, then what I would need to do is I would need to Google like Lannister bannerman during the what like the War of the Five Kings, and then I would have to find some random hedge knight, some hedge knight that was loyal to the Lannisters, and then I would draw Hussein in there.
Okay, thank you.
Fair enough.
All right. Then, I'm at like 5 hours, and that's how long I'm supposed to work. So, I parasocially love you. Fun conversation. I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and I will see y'all soon. All right.
Love you.
Goodbye, Conor.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them.